Thursday afternoon chat. Your favorite artists with Jayar.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome today's guest, comedian Brian Bates. How are you, sir?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. I want to set up how yours. Normally, I have artists we play on the Joy FM. You know, just singers, Toby Mac, Chris Tomlin, and I know you're a believer, so you know some of these names.
Yeah.
And so here in our building, we've become huge fans of Nate Bargatze, who has just kind of become this worldwide phenomenon.
Right.
But you are in a weekly podcast with Nate, which is called Nate Land, and you're also a comedian for a job.
Yes.
Yes, that's what you do all week. Is you're doing stand up all over the country, and then you come together with Nate and another comedian and do a podcast, which we've absolutely adore.
Thank you.
Called Nate Land.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Yeah.
I know you're the brains behind it all.
I'm the brains. I'm the It should be called Batesland.
Batesland.
Because I do it all. No. Nate pays for all the production and brings in all the people, so I guess it should be named after him. But I do all the research on it. I reply to all the fans and check the social media, so I do a lot as well.
Well, first of all, let's get the green screen going before we get into anything. We give all the artists a chance to pick the background. Yeah. So when we share these clips on socials, people will see. You've seen a list of like 30 potential backgrounds. What would you like to go with?
I didn't know I got to pick, but I'll go with, how about African Safari?
Let's do it. Nobody's chosen that one. Okay.
Whoa.
This is great. I've never been either, so this is wonderful. It's like a real live version of The Lion King.
Yeah.
Here. That's great. I'm a little nervous, though, of what's going to come behind us. But, okay, good. Let's get after it.
Yeah.
Let's start with, all right, so when you work on a podcast with a guy who, and I find it kind of awkward yet comical in the podcast when you guys are, the bigger and bigger Nate Bargatze gets, I'm kind of curious how
This already feels like Chris Farley. When you work with Nate Bargatze, what's he like?
That was awesome.
That was so awesome.
Do you remember when you were with the Beatles? That was awesome. But how have you guys seen just being associated? Because you guys you and Aaron are very funny comedians. But Nate's on this worldwide level.
Yeah.
How have you seen shows for you I've been listening to the podcast for almost 2 years now. How has life changed since being on the podcast with Nate? Have you seen shows?
Definitely. It's changed drastically. I've toured with Nate for years, opening for him. So I've watched him go from small clubs to big clubs to sold out theaters.
Yeah.
But I really didn't realize how little people paid attention to the opener until I started doing the podcast, because now people do know me and they'll say, we would love to see you sometime perform. We saw Nate in Green Bay. And I'm like, I opened for him in Green Bay, but they didn't know me then and they didn't care. At the time I thought I was doing great and a big deal, but I now realize no one cares about the opener unless they actually know him.
What's the story that what was it? Nate made fun of you the other day because you were the one saying, do you want a picture with, I forget what
there's so many like that. What was that?
I think I cried laughing because the big joke was Brian will ask pictures with the fans.
Yeah. I've done that. I'm too overzealous at times. So, and I check the email. Can't remember that particular one, but I check the emails, for the podcast. It usually ends up with me being the last one to email because they're finally done with me. They're like, all right, we get it. Because we'll go back and forth to the point where we're like, all right, dude, I don't know what else to say. Leave me alone. And then there was a story I told about, again, on the road with Nate. We do this big theater. The next day I'm at a sandwich shop. I see this girl there, attractive woman. So I remembered her. She was sitting right up front. Yeah. And I said, hey, were you at the Nate Bargatze show last night? That's the story. And she said, yeah, were you?
And you're like, I'm the opener.
And I was like, yeah, I was the opening act. She's like, oh, yeah. I thought you looked familiar. She tried to cover her tracks, but she had no idea who I was. She didn't care.
So great. because we Toby Mac actually set it up so that we could drive down to Naples. Just about everybody in this room right now.
Yeah.
And such a genuine guy. Almost like you're glad to see somebody with that kind of celeb not let it go to their head.
Right.
Maybe he's different privately, but at least with
Toby?
us. No, Nate.
Or Nate.
Nate, Toby set it up, but
when
we're sitting there, we're talking backstage with Nate Bargatze, and it's like, it's great to see, he's just this genuine, nice guy.
Yeah,
and
that's an act.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Privately, he's not a good person.
Diva. Yeah.
He's beyond a diva. He's just not a good person, really, altogether. No, Nate's great. He's wonderful. He surrounded himself. I mean, he moved back home to be with his family. He surrounded himself with friends he grew up with, and his tour manager, his high school buddy, known all his life. His sister is now working for him as his assistant. So, when you're around family and friends that you've grown up with, they keep you in line because they won't let you get a big head.
Yeah. Yeah. Even in, it's just the podcast is such a great mix because you got Nate who's run into money because of his hard work.
Right.
He's earned it, all that.
Right.
You got you being older in age, but looking up to Nate career-wise, like learning from him. Mm-hmm. Aaron's on the opposite spectrum of age, but looking up to Nate. Mm-hmm. So as a fan, and me and my son and a lot of people in this room are fans of the podcast, it's a dynamic of life. I mean, it's a sitcom.
Right.
The podcast is a sitcom. And it is actually, I do one of the most highest rated shows in the Tampa Bay area on the radio, and I listen to the Nate Land podcast for career purposes. So when I go in to do a show where comedy is kind of, it's 20% spiritual, reading scriptures and stuff, 80% just trying to make people laugh for a living. Not on a comedian. Your job is way harder than mine to be exposed to them. But I listen because it's the pursuit of the joke. And I thank God for this, that in my line of work and yours as well, it says in Proverbs that laughter is good like a medicine. So essentially, you're not just cutting it up. You're giving people a gift. The ability to laugh is something people in their very hard lives. If you can make somebody laugh, it's like a gift you can give. Well,
thank you very much for saying that. I really appreciate that. And it did. Our podcast started during the pandemic. We started in the middle of 2020. And kind of because of the pandemic, we were all stuck at home. So Nate started this podcast. But so many people have said it was such a blessing to them because of what's going on in their life or because they're stuck at home. And, there was so much political upheaval and that's been going on for the last couple of years. I mean, longer than that. But, the last 2 years have really been hard on people. And we don't talk about politics. We don't try not to talk about anything controversial. Just have fun. Tell jokes. So many people say it reminds them of their buddies, just three guys hanging out, cutting up, making fun of each other. Like you said, we're all at different spectrums, age-wise, career-wise. So it gives a little perspective from all three of us, So I feel like it really identifies. People identify with it.
Well, I find I do the same thing. Like you guys take topics every week. Like it's okay. This year let's talk about the 80s. Next week we're going to talk about Rhode Island.
Right.
I do the same thing on my show where when I bring something up with my buddy Steve's in the room, my producer, it's all, if I bring up a story about, my wife caught a coupon the other day and blah, blah, blah. It's not about the coupon. It's we're going to bounce off that and find Seinfeld was huge at this, to take something he observed at a stoplight and find a way to pitch it to his audience that can make them laugh. And it's an art form. If you can do it, it's an art form that is not easy, or else everybody would be able to do it. And so,
I mean, the most outrageous topics are sometimes the hardest ones to make jokes about because they're already been done or they're so obvious. So we like to take we did a topic on calendars.
That's one of my favorites.
And did a whole episode just on calendars and something very
But I didn't know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I learned something.
Yeah.
But then, all of a sudden the joke turns to who was the main guy, the Gregorian.
Yeah.
Who was Pope Greg? Who was Pope Greg?
Yeah.
And why did, you know.
Nate's so good. I mean, none of us are very smart, but Nate's really good about making anyone listening feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
Because he's not only going to ask the question that people were afraid to ask or too dumb, he's going to ask something even dumber than anyone was thinking.
Oh yeah.
And his mind just works so differently. So it makes you laugh. I think it makes people feel good because
they know how to read.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So many people say they usually skip the ads, but they stick around for him just to see how he reads them.
Oh, yeah. Do the clients mind that he messes up the ad, or it probably gets more attention for the client?
Yeah, I don't know. People ask me that a lot. I don't know. Occasionally we'll have to do a free one because he messed up so much.
A redo.
Yeah.
Could you please tell everybody about your squirrel drama? You live in the Nashville area, but you grew up out in the country.
Well, the squirrel drama happened where I'm at now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's this was just a few months ago.
Okay. It got pretty bad.
Yeah. I took my car into the shop because I guess I can't even remember what it was running fine, but some light had come on the dash.
Yeah.
And the guy came in at the mechanic shop and he sat down beside me. And when they sit down,
it's like in the hospital.
It's like in the hospital. It's like they're about to give you bad news and they're trying to brief you. And he said rodents had chewed through your fuel line, among some other things. And he said it's going to be $4,500 to have it fixed. And the reason I knew, because this had happened to my wife, not this much, and my father-in-law as well. We have so many squirrels in our neighborhood, and we don't have a garage, that squirrels had gotten in our car and chewed through the fuel line. So my car was in the shop for 2 weeks. Thankfully, my insurance covered it. I would have never even thought to ask, but he said, call your insurance company. They covered it. But now we've got fake snakes out in the yard. We've got mothballs because somebody said do that. People are sending all these different remedies. Apparently, this is kind of a bigger thing than people realize.
Yeah.
But squirrels.
I can see having one or two, but you must have a colony like that.
We do. We live just kind of near a lot of wooded areas, and there's just a lot of wildlife in general and a lot of squirrels.
So on your insurance, does it now list, is that somebody that signs up for a policy later, it's going to be because of you that they have to cover
damage.
Rodent. Yeah, I would never have even thought to check that.
I know.
The way Nate makes fun of you, though, is I can see you because you give off this, I'm a 50-year-old guy that lived before you got married, that lives alone. You walk outside with an army. What was it, an army?
I was wearing, when I told the story, I had an Air Force hat on the podcast. And then Nate said I'd have a BB gun, and I'd look like just some guy out there.
To the neighbors, it looks like a 50-year-old guy trying to be war guy.
Yeah.
Shooting BB guns.
Just waving at everybody like Forrest Gump.
That was great. Okay. You're going to, first of all, congratulations. You're in your 50s. I just need to say that to set that up.
I just turned 50. I'm not in my 50s. I just turned 50 a month ago. Come on.
That's like David Brent from the British Office.
Yes.
So we're both in our 30s. Yeah, but I just turned 30. And how old are you? It doesn't matter. I'm in my 30s.
Yeah.
And you're going to be a first-time father.
Yes.
Which, congratulations.
Thank you.
It was a big thing on the podcast where you waited till the end, and it was like, by the way, you even put it into
a comment.
Yeah. And Nate, and everybody's like, what did you say?
Yeah.
I'm going to be a dad. And it shocked everybody.
Yeah.
What are some pros and just in your mind as you're thinking of becoming a dad, pros and cons of being 50 and starting dadhood now? Things you're nervous about, but also pros.
I was going to say, I can certainly list the cons.
Actually, I've got it right here.
Yeah. The cons are I'll be a lot more tired. I mean, how old were you when you had children?
I was 25.
Yeah, see, that's half my age.
Yeah.
And you were probably exhausted, right?
I am now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the cons are obvious. I'm going to be exhausted. My wife, who's 45, is going to be exhausted. I'm going to be 68 at my child's high school graduation.
That's awesome.
Who knows how much further I'll make after that.
You'll get to use handicap at the school when you roll up for the graduation.
That's true.
That's cool.
I'll have good parking. The pros, I'm told, is a little bit more mature. So
wisdom,
a little bit more wisdom, a little bit more patience.
Yeah.
Financially, I'm certainly better shape than we would have been in our 20s. So So I don't know. Those are, I mean, I'm going to be one of those guys who everyone's going to think I'm the grandfather.
Right.
And they're going to say things to me like, aren't grandchildren the best?
Yeah.
And I'm going to be like, I guess. We'll see. I mean, I turned 50 and I immediately started getting letters in the mail from AARP and retirement communities.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to have to call these retirement communities and be like, do you have childcare? Do you offer childcare? Because I need that.
Well, we've never been asked that before.
Yeah. So.
Wait, this is a sad turn, Brian. That you'll wait.
About to find out.
Yeah. No, I'm saying like one of the cons would be just age-wise grandchildren. Yeah. Oh man, you'll be 90 something.
It's like it just hit you. Now it's hitting me.
It just
thank
hit
you for
me.
breaking this news to me.
You've already
I won't live
squared
to
with
see my
this.
grandkids.
I just met you, and I'm now having to square with this.
Oh.
It's hitting me right now.
Hang in there, buddy.
Thank you,
all right.
Brian. Thank you. I guess if you're okay with it, I can be okay with it.
You were the first one I thought of when we found out we were pregnant. I was like, I don't know how he's going to take it.
Yeah.
But
when he finds out how old I'm going to be when grandkids come, he's not going to deal with this.
Look, we had already accepted we weren't going to have children, so
It's a blessing.
You're
playing with house money now.
Right.
To be able to become a father now is, and you're not. I'm 44, so I'm like right on the cusp of you. And I mean, my back is starting to hurt. My hair is starting to thin. But I'm at the beginning of
Bless
this.
your heart.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you this one. As a believer working in the mainstream world now, working bars and clubs, what's been, because this is just between you and I noticed that because and the audience.
Who's watching this?
Just the 7 of us.
Okay.
Nate has to, because Nate's got the Netflix deal and all this stuff. We have artists we play that like are really successful in the mainstream,
right?
But they also have Christian,
right?
And you can tell they're a lot more careful about not going too deep. And I can tell this in the podcast that Nate's not afraid to say he's a believer, but he won't go too far. And I always notice you are the one that is not afraid to talk about church or God. You're the one that will drop the line. I'm like, he's a believer. That's how I knew to reach out to you. Is like, hey, I'm at a Christian station. Brian's a Christian. But for you, what's been kind of the toughest part about being a Christian in a lot of non-Christian circles, doing those club gigs where this is not I know you do churches, but a lot of events, there's a lot of non-believers out here, but what's been the tough part for you about maybe being in that world?
It really hasn't been that tough. I mean, in some ways it's helped me to stand out because so many comedians and clubs and bars, they're doing the same material. They're doing drug material. They're doing just girls, nasty stuff. And it all kind of blends together. So when I'm clean, or even if I share my faith on stage, it makes me stand out to people and be more memorable. So it hasn't been that bad. I mean, maybe there's stuff I don't even know about, stuff I'm missing out on because they're like, this don't have him part of it. But it's been very little negative.
Have you seen a change maybe in Nate and coming from the New York comedy days, coming back to his roots where a lot of people around the Nashville, he's back in a Christian, like faith-wise, is he coming home? Was it a good thing for him faith-wise? And
yeah, I mean, I think so. It's good to always be back around
Bible believe,
more believers.
Yeah.
The tough thing with our job is it's really hard to get connected in a church.
Yeah.
Because we're on the road all the time, especially on weekends.
Yeah.
So that's one negative I would say is just
be a part of a community of faith.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, I often watch on Sundays. I'll watch church on Zoom.
Yeah.
And I'll try to stay connected when I can, but it's just not the same.
Yeah.
So that's one of the drawbacks. I have a ton of friends who are Christian comedians who are full time, and I know that's not even what you're asking, but they do that full time, performing at churches, and I think that's great. And I perform at churches, but to me, I want to reach more non-believers.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's my calling.
Yeah.
So
Which
that's
is great.
Yeah. That's kind of where I feel like I fit in the best. And I don't want to tiptoe, but I want to show people that you can be funny, still be a believer, not be hokey, and not deny your faith.
Yeah. Our radio station does not allow me anymore. I do the afternoon show Drive Time.
Mm-hmm.
And in that studio, I am the master of my domain. I am confident. I know what I'm doing, get great ratings, but they don't let me go introduce bands anymore because when I step in front of a live audience, my safety net's gone. And so I go from being one of the most confident entertainers to this guy who is like speech class in high school. And I mess up the words. So they're like, you know what? Just stay home. We'll get the street team to go introduce Toby Mac. Because something happens to me in the live audience. And so when I'm a student of comedy, Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee is like school for comedians. Incredible. And so your line of work to me, I respect so much because the ability, you and I are doing the same job, except I get to go hide in the studio. You have to put yourself out there in front of a live audience. A lot of times alcohol's involved, so the audience is more free to yell things, and I couldn't take it. So I've never even tried to get up and do what do you call it, the open mic night?
Right.
I couldn't, I can work on comedy privately.
Right.
But I would never go do it because I can't take that instant rejection of a joke not working.
Right.
And that's where I respect your line of work. But what is the most nervous you have ever been in your life on stage? Can you think of the moment that you wanted to go run? And obviously a joke not working, you get that a lot. Where if it doesn't work, you're like, no, not you specifically, like a comedian.
Right, obviously you get that a lot. Joke's not working.
You know what I'm saying with something missing.
So you're used to that, Brian. Is there anything worse than your set that really upsets you?
No, I'm saying like something other than maybe a joke not working, like where you just wanted to run and hide. Was there one night in particular?
I've performed in front of all black audiences, and that can be intimidating.
Yeah.
But it's also, and I remember being really nervous. It's also one of the best experiences I've ever had. Huh. And I'll plug a video of mine. I have a YouTube video that has like 2.5 million views now of me performing in front of an all-black audience. Yeah. And because I am so white, I'm not just white, I'm very white.
Gaffigan white?
Yeah. I'm like the definition of white.
Yeah.
It was such a contrast that they love me, and it went really, really, really well. Huh. So it ended up being such a great experience. But I remember being very nervous, of course, into a packed all-black audience because I was very, very nervous how they'd accept me. When I started, I was always really nervous, never to the point where like I can't do this. Yeah. And I still get nervous. I just performed at a church, and the setup wasn't good, and I'm like, oh boy, I don't think they're gonna go for me. Yeah. And I was right.
Right.
They did not go for me.
Right. But do you ever get back on the plane? Like if something doesn't work, do you ever get back on the plane? Like how do you get back on the horse on weekends like that where it's like that just didn't fly?
Well,
like you're good.
But boy, I don't know if you were like this, but I could have 10 great shows in the world and then one bad experience, and I'm like, I should quit.
You're Van Gogh with a knife in your hand.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm like, this is terrible. This is terrible. And I've told this story on our podcast, but one of the most painful bombing stories was the one I performed with my mom in attendance. Yeah. Where I performed in my hometown for the Wilson County Livestock Association.
Oh, yeah. As one does.
Yes, of course. It was an outdoor event at a park pavilion in 90-degree weather, which was also the average age of the people there. Right. And they had big fans blowing, which helped to keep the tears in my eyes. Right. And the guy who went up before me was from the County Processing Association, talking about a proposed tax increase.
Oh, nice.
And I thought, well, they'll at least like me better than him, but they did not. They were at least interested in that tax increase. And I bombed and bombed and bombed.
And your mom's
right and my mom's there in the audience, and all of a sudden, we could not make eye contact. It was so awkward. Yeah. And I finally got done. And I usually, when I bomb, I go hide in the green room until everybody's gone. We're at an outdoor picnic pavilion. I had nowhere to go. Yeah. I had to sit back down, squeeze in between two people who hated my act, and just sit there through the thing. Then they start auctioneering off some stuff. I forgot to mention that they'd asked me to donate a CD to to auction off for this thing. So they start doing all the auctioneering. People are bidding on bags of feed and troughs and they're all getting into it. I don't care. I'm just like, thank you for not paying attention to me. Yeah. Then they lift up my CD and they're like, all right, we're going to bid on the CD from the comedian. After bombing, everything gets quiet again. And I'm like, oh, can you just please move on?
Tell me your mom bid on it.
I got my head down. I'm like, oh, I hope my mom doesn't have to buy the CD. And I look over at her and her head's down like, I do not want to have to buy this CD. I still have to live here. Finally, the auctioneer just be generous. Like, all right, I'm going to buy this myself just to move it along. No. It was one of the worst. And then I had to take my mom home and we didn't even talk about it in the car. We just like, let's just move on. Yeah. So I've got plenty of painful bombing stories like that after the fact.
Even after that, I still respect you because you did it. This is your line of work now. You're doing it. It's one of the toughest gigs. And so that's why when you see Nate having, and even watching every time the podcast airs and you and Aaron are like, yeah, I did a sold out show. It's like, as a fan of the podcast, we are like rooting for your career because it's like, oh my gosh, he's selling out shows and shows. But you're very funny, and I'm a tough critic, and even Aaron's stuff is not as funny as you. But it's like, it's very funny stuff to sort of watch success happen. Does Nate treat you guys like a proud papa as you guys find more success?
Yeah, I think so.
Or does he doesn't care?
And another thing I'll say is with music's super, super hard. But when you're starting out performing these terrible venues like sports bars or wherever, it's a more passive audience in the sense that you can sit there, you can listen, you can clap at the end. Comedy is active. You have to be laughing. So... yeah. There's really not bombing so much in music, right. I don't think. Not like comedy.
They could be bored or not into it.
Yes.
But they don't get violent.
It's not obvious how bad the performer's doing.
Yeah.
But in comedy, if no one's listening or if no one's laughing, it's clear to everyone that guy's not doing well.
Yeah.
And no one cares.
Yeah.
And I've had friends come to shows and you can fake laughter for a little while.
Yeah.
But only for a little while. That's nothing you can't really.
Yeah.
After a while, you see if they're faking it or not.
Yeah. I want to finish on this one story because we saw Nate play in Naples, as I mentioned, and very funny show. It was his most recent stuff. But I don't go in crowds. I don't like crowds, so this was rare for me to leave my house. And so there I am with was my wife with us? No, me and my daughter, Steve, a group of us here in this room are there. We're in the back row. We've been waiting for this for a long time, paid money to see Nate. And so we know every joke in the Tennessee Kid and in Greatest Average American. We know all the jokes, and this is all new stuff. But the tables in front of us, the people were talking, and I asked Nate about this backstage after. I'm like, why are you here? If you're going to talk, they were complaining about their bill. Like, I've been waiting for this day for 3 months. And I was like, does that bother you? People are like having side conversations and stuff. And it distracted me.
Yeah.
Because, it's like, why didn't you go to a movie? Why didn't you go to something else? This is a guy. You have to listen to get this stuff. And you guys are arguing over bills and, what should we order?
So this was a venue there where there was actual tables and people ordering?
Yeah, it was like tables ordering, where the checks come, all that stuff.
Huh.
But it was the fact that I couldn't understand why they weren't hanging off every joke, every word.
Yeah.
And I was distracted. I couldn't hear. I was getting mad. I wasn't going to make a scene like, hey, shut up, But it bothered me.
Yeah, and that rarely happens for Nate now because now everyone knows who he is, and they're usually very invested. So that's surprising a little bit to hear. It still happens, though. I open a lot now for Leanne Morgan, who's another very funny, clean comedian that people should check out, and fans love her. But just this past weekend, we had one heckler right up front, and he's talking the whole show, and he's right up front, so I can hear him. He's throwing my timing off, and I finally had to stop and say something to him in front of 3,000 people in a packed theater.
See, I couldn't deal.
That's not ideal.
Yeah. So how does that go?
Well, he was very inebriated.
Yeah.
So therefore, even though he shut up for a minute, he was so drunk he just couldn't even.
And this is your livelihood. You've worked on this joke.
Yes.
And it's how you pay your bills, and one person can come and throw the whole thing off.
I was afraid pauses are so important in comedy for timing, and I was afraid to pause because I was afraid he was going to yell something or say something to ruin the joke. He eventually got shown out, but it's rare nowadays with these theater shows that Nate does. That happens, but occasionally still happens.
Yeah, you almost want to charge more to get the real fans in, so you can avoid, oh, hey, I don't even know who's up here.
Well, there's a lot of truth to that. Comedy clubs, very often when you're not a named act, but they still want to sell food and drinks, they do a thing called papering the room, which is basically just giving out free tickets to get people in so they'll buy food and drinks. The problem is these people aren't invested in the act at all. So most of us would rather have 100 people that were actually there to see us than 300 where 200 of them could care less. Because it's just going to make it a worse show.
Oh, yeah. Well, outside of Nateland podcast, where can we send people to check out your stand-up?
Well, my website's brianbatescomedy.com. Instagram, Brian Bates Comic.
Okay.
Twitter, this Brian Bates Comic.
Okay.
Stuff like that.
We'd love to keep in touch because we're a fan, and so whenever you got something new you want to showcase in paper the Southeast, let me know, and we'll put you on the air. And definitely, whenever you're coming to the Southeast, want to make sure people get to these shows and not heckle you.
Yes.
So congrats on the baby as well.
Thank you so much.
I had this big idea. My mother has a printing machine.
Yeah.
And so I was gonna have a onesie made up for you with the show's logo and breakfast on the back, and I ran out of time before you came in, but I was going to have that.
I kind of wish you hadn't told me that.
So when you come to Florida, sorry, I had a great idea of a gift.
Yeah.
And so I'd rather just tell you about it.
You're trying to take credit for a gift that you didn't do.
I was going to get you a Lamborghini and have the license plate say Bates. So whenever you're in the Southeast, I'm going to make that happen and show up at a show, except the baby will have outgrown the onesie by the time you
make it a twosie.
Yeah. Appreciate the time. Appreciate you dropping by.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The Thursday Afternoon Chat. Your favorite artists with Jayar.